Hello Greens, how are you today? This is Michael O'Neill. I'm your friendly Green Party of New York organizer, and this is how Greens get things done. And on this weekly live stream, I talk to you about some of the tips, tricks, and strategies for building the Green Party, being a more effective participant in social movements, and running more competitive campaigns. And I want to thank you for joining me this week. This week, we are going to be talking about some basics of facilitation. Now, when I'm talking about facilitation, what do I mean? Specifically, meeting facilitation. Greens are all about democracy, and democracy is all about meetings. Democracy is about having conversations and making decisions in a grassroots, equitable, deliberative context. And so when Greens need to make decisions, we need to have meetings. And those meetings need to have quality facilitation to move those meetings along so that they are productive and so that they feel productive for the people who are participating in them. But at the same time, those meetings need to have a sense of fairness and a sense of equality for the participants, and a sense that people feel heard and that their views are being respected, and that everyone is getting their chance to speak and to ask questions and to participate. And importantly, that other people in the meeting are not being able to dominate the meeting either inadvertently or purposefully. And so in the past, we've talked about some of the tools to help with meeting facilitation, such as having an agenda, having timed agendas, and using timekeeping during the meeting to make sure that enough time is being allotted to particular agenda items, and also timing people's speaking time so that people are able to manage their expectations as to how much they have to make their point without running on so long that it keeps other people from being able to participate and dragging the meeting behind. And so those are some of the topics that we've talked about regarding meeting format in the past. Today I'm going to talk about some of the things that a facilitator should keep in mind. Now, in other organizations, arguably more conservative organizations or organizations that are not as dedicated to grassroots democracy, the head of a meeting is referred to as a chair, right? And in Robert's Rules of Order, you have the chair of the meeting, and the chair is, in those traditions, more of an overt figurehead of authority. And in Green Party culture and a lot of other left spaces, we talk about having a meeting facilitator. And this is not someone who is an overlord of the meeting. You can think of the facilitator almost as like a coach for the meeting. And the game of the meeting is to get as much done as quickly as possible in a way that people are having fun. And the facilitator is the coach who is trying to prompt the participants to keep moving, keep getting things done, and to make sure that they are abiding by the rules of the game so that everybody has fun. And the facilitator is not a player in the game per se, or at least not in the same way as other meeting participants. In fact, being a facilitator is an exercise in ego restraint, because it's a role that is very easy to abuse, either consciously or unconsciously, to exert your will over the meeting and over the participants in a way that is unfair. And it really is in your interest as a facilitator to try and develop a conscious practice of facilitation, because even if you are not trying to influence the meeting in an unfair way, if you are perceived as doing so, your members are going to become disillusioned with you very quickly. Greens People do not become Greens because they are really into giving authority figures the benefit of the doubt. That's not really on brand for Greens. So if you're going to facilitate a meeting, if you're going to take on that role, it's in everybody's interest for you to very clearly signal that you are keeping fairness and democratic principles at the forefront of your mind as you are attempting to coach the meeting through. All right, let's go to the magic window so I can walk you through some of the principles for this concept, for this conversation on facilitation. Here we go. All right, kicking off with number one, what facilitation is not. I introduced this a little bit, but as the facilitator, your job is not to be the smartest person in the meeting. Your job is not to be the person who has all of the best points to make and all of the best questions to ask. Like in so many things with organizing, your job as the facilitator is arguably to listen a lot more than you speak. You should not be speaking any more than you have to. Your job is to coach the other members of the meeting to participate in the fullest capacity that they can. You are there to facilitate their decision-making and their participation. Now, you're also a member of the organization, so of course you still get to vote on things and you get to have your say, but this is an example of where the first must be last. You need to make sure that everybody else has had a chance to make their point in the conversation before you put yourself in the conversation to make your point. And another thing about facilitation is that, in terms of what it's not, it's not a chance for like you to, pursue all the questions that you have regarding a certain topic. If you're really doing your job elegantly, any questions that you have will probably be answered by other people asking the same question, that you are granting those people a chance to ask those questions, and they'll get to those questions quicker than you would be able to. And so that is an encapsulation of what facilitation is not. It is not a chance for you to guide the meeting wherever you want. It is not a role for you to be the smartest, most informed person in the room, and it is not a chance for you to pursue all of your own personal avenues for questions that you have. In fact, it's the opposite of all those things. You need to be thinking about the rest of the members and what are making them as smart and as incisive as possible, and giving them the chance to ask their questions, and facilitating the body to find the direction that it needs to go in the context of the meeting and the agenda. All right, so what are the goals of facilitation? You want to keep it moving, you want to seek disagreement, and you want to seek decisions. Now, by keeping it moving, I mean moving through the agenda. You want to keep, meetings are not fun typically, right? These are business meetings. We're there to work, right? And I mean, maybe it's fun in the sense that you're accomplishing things, right? If there's fun to be had in a business meeting, it's in the sense of accomplishment that you are further along on something than you were before. And so if you don't have that sense of accomplishment, if people do not have the sensation that they are moving forward and getting done things that are important to them and that are important to their relationship to the party, if they don't have that conscious sense of motion and progress, then meetings are really not fun. And then it's like, well, why are we here, right? So you want to make sure that you're moving through the agenda. You don't want to rush things, right? You want to make sure that everything is getting as much time as it needs. I would say the pace of your meeting should feel like an afternoon bike ride. So it's not a snail's pace, it's not a leisurely walk pace, it's not a zooming down the highway pace, It's the pace of a afternoon ride on your bicycle. So you've got some speed, but not too much. You're going as fast as you would like to go, but you are not moving in a hurried way. So that would be the sense of progress, the sense of speed through the meeting that I would try to maintain, and I do try to maintain. It should be a little bit quicker than just a normal conversation, right? Because you're not just having a normal conversation, you have asked a group of Greens or your committee members or whoever to take time out of their busy lives, to take time away from their children, their jobs, their homes, their Netflix binge watching, to come together and get some stuff done for your party. So that should have a sense of urgency to it. Not a sense of alarm, but a sense of urgency, and certainly not a sense of lethargy or stagnation. Seeking disagreement. What do I mean by that? Intuitively, you would think that, oh, well, we don't want disagreement, right? We're all on the same team, right? And so why would we be seeking disagreement in the context of a meeting? Well, the reality is that there almost certainly is some disagreement, or maybe difference of viewpoint or difference of opinion might be better ways of phrasing it, on important issues. On the issues that are most important to our party, that involve any level of complexity or nuance or history, you're going to have people who just see it differently. And those differences exist in the room whether or not you acknowledge them. And it's better to acknowledge them, to get them acknowledged. So as the facilitator, if you are hearing in people's contributions that people might disagree on something or have a difference of viewpoint, you can use your role as facilitator to re-articulate what they're saying. So just as in an active listening scenario one-on-one, where one of the things that you can do is to make sure that you understand the other person, and so that the other person feels understood, is you can say, okay, Jane Doe, what I've heard you say is XYZ. Do you agree with how I have phrased that? So if you hear in a comment during the meeting something that is maybe, I don't want to say hiding a difference of opinion, but you can hear the kernel of a difference of viewpoint in there, you can take a moment as facilitator to say, all right, Jane Doe, if I hear you correctly, are you saying XYZ? And you as briefly as possible, articulate what they've said in a way that maybe highlights or heightens the differing viewpoint that you're hearing in their comment or question. And chances are they will agree with that and say, yes, that is what I meant, or that is a concern that I had. And so as the facilitator, you need to be actively listening, almost hunting for clues in people's comments where maybe people are not on the same page. Maybe it's not that they disagree on something. Maybe they actually just aren't understanding each other. Like one person and another person, like they're talking about two different things and they don't even realize it. Or maybe they're talking about the same thing and they don't realize it. And then you provide a little context, or you give them a chance to ask a question or answer a question to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So that is what I mean by seeking disagreement. Now, once you have found points of difference, either in understanding or viewpoint, or just people just don't agree on what to do, then your job is to seek a decision. And so as the facilitator, you are inviting people to step forward with a motion, and we're going to talk about motions in just a moment. A motion within the context of Robert's Rules of Order, which the Green Party of New York and a lot of other organizations borrow from to greater and lesser extents depending on the organization. A motion is what you're putting forward for a vote for a decision. And within the Green Party, there is also a history and a tradition of seeking consensus. And consensus is where everyone tries to agree on one thing rather than just having a majority rules vote and where there's winners and losers. But in either case, for the purposes of this conversation, you are trying to get from a position where you have discovered where the disagreement is, and now you're trying to get to a decision, whether it's via consensus or through a motion that will be voted on. And again, the temptation is for you as the facilitator to just say what you want the body to vote on. But that's not your job. Your job is to kind of clear the field and invite people to step forward. Maybe there was one or two people in the conversation who seemed to have the firmest grasp or seemed to have a firm grasp on what it was that they wanted to happen. And you also get a sense that either a majority of the room or at least some of the room was on the same page. You could open the stack, which we'll talk about in just a moment, for someone to put forward a motion along the lines of the viewpoint that seems to have a base of support within the room. Or it can be just as simple as saying, we're nearing the end of time on this agenda item. We need to come to a decision. Is there someone who has a motion that they'd like to put forward? It can be as simple as that. And so that is the aspect of seeking decisions. So as the facilitator, you want to keep the meeting moving. You want to seek disagreement or difference, and you want to seek decisions to resolve those disagreements or those differences. Now, the way that we as Greens, and again, this is a tradition in a lot of left organizations, move through conversations in the context of a meeting is through what we call the stack. And we call it the stack. You could think of it as a stack of names or a list of names that you're moving through that determines the speaking order. And so the stack is often helped by having someone other than the facilitator be the person who's keeping track of those names, but it can be the facilitator who also keeps track of those names. So if I'm in a meeting and we have an agenda item to decide what is the best color, and so I say, okay, so we now come on to the agenda item for what is the best color in the world. We will now open discussion on what people believe is the best color in the world. I'm opening the stack for discussion on that. Who would like to speak? And then Jane Doe raises a hand, and I say, yes, Jane Doe. And then Timothy Green raises his hand, and I say, okay, yes, Timothy. And I write Jane on a list, and then I write Timothy's name below that. And then Carrie Eisenhower raises a hand, and I say, yes, Carrie, okay, I acknowledge you for the stack. I write Carrie's name underneath Jane and Timothy. And so I have a stack of 3 names, really a list, right? But I don't know why we call it a stack instead of a list. It's just what we do. But we have a list of 3 names, and then that's going to be the speaking order. And so we take a few of those down, and then we move through that order. So first, Jane speaks, again within the allotted, agreed upon speaking time that we have for this agenda item. And then I say, okay, thank you, Carrie. Timothy, you're next on the stack. Timothy then speaks, and then I thank Timothy when Timothy is done, and then I say, Carrie, you're next on the stack, please go ahead. Carrie speaks, etc., etc. And then periodically I ask, is there anyone else who would like to join the stack? And you do that, between speakers. Now, in left circles, we follow what's called a progressive stack, which is that we will order the stack such that historically marginalized identities and roles are put at the forefront of the conversation. So women, LGBTQI, people of ethnicities that have been historically oppressed and exploited. We number one, we want to encourage people and seek participants from our meeting to join the stack. And then if you have a list of people where three male identified speakers have spoken in a row, and then there's two more male identified speakers after that on the list, and a female identified person raises a hand, you're going to have that female identified person speak next, even though there were two male identified people on the stack before that female identified person. So we're moving that voice to the forefront of the stack because we believe that there's value to that, and that is part of how we are trying to run our organization in a way that reflects the type of justice and equity that we seek to build in the larger world. So that's progressive stack. And you want to think of it as like a loop that you're going through. And it's this, and this gets into the meeting having a sense of motion, right? And it's almost like a call and response sort of game. So, you open the stack, you say, all right, is there anyone for the stack? Carrie, Jane, Zachary, great. Carrie, you're up. Carrie speaks. Thank you, Carrie. Jane, you're up next. You want to have it almost like a tennis balls like coming back and forth, or you're like hitting ping pong balls back and forth between you and your members. People should have a sense that this is going somewhere, and when it's time for them to speak, that there's a little bit of urgency to that. Now, not panic, right? We're not putting people on the spot. We don't want people to feel rushed in their speaking, but we are here to work, and so there should be a sense of that everyone needs to be engaged and locked on here, especially if you want to speak during the meeting. You need to be paying attention and know when it's your turn to speak, and hopefully that you have your ideas ordered in a way that you can relate them efficiently, and that everyone else is engaged fully in listening as questions and comments and information are being relayed to the group. So that is the stack loop of opening the stack, gathering names for the stack, moving on to the next person in the stack, and then thanking them for their participation, and then moving on to the next person, and then periodically asking if there's anyone else who would like to join the stack. And then also between speakers in the stack is where you can do any housekeeping, like announcing how much time there is left on the agenda item, or if you are detecting where there is disagreement in the room, or difference of viewpoint, or perhaps difference of understanding in the room, you can, as shortly and efficiently as possible, point those out to the people that are assembled, and that can help shape the conversation. Again, you are helping the conversation discover itself. You're not imposing what you want to happen on the conversation. And if you are doing a good job of encouraging participation and and ensuring that people have a fair chance to participate, then I believe that people will trust that you are truly seeking what the membership is thinking and not just, trying to impose your own spin on the conversation. That's where the logistics can have an impact on the bigger picture of the meeting. If you're doing the little things right and you're administering them fairly and efficiently, then I think people will give you more leeway and more trust on when you as the facilitator step forward and offer what you hear the meeting saying, what you hear developing within the conversation in the meeting. All right, so the motion loop. I think I'm just going to do a brief introduction on this because we're running out of time for this stream. But as I mentioned earlier, a motion is what someone is putting forward as a decision to be voted upon or a decision that you are seeking consensus on. And so it should be an affirmative statement. So, I move that this body declare blue to be the best color in the human visible spectrum from now until eternity. And that's a definitive motion. And over the course of the meeting, you might hear people kind of putting things forward in their comments as what they would like the body to do, but they're not actually moving for that to happen. And so one thing you can do as facilitator is to ask, is that a motion? Or are you seeking to make a motion on this item? Or especially if you hear different people articulating the same desire for a decision on something, you can just say, it sounds like this is something that people want to do. Is there anyone who's willing or ready to put forward a motion on that decision? And then they say, they raise their hand to be acknowledged, and you acknowledge them, and then they move to blah, 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 whatever it is, that I move to approve $500 for this budget item, or I move that we, as our county organization, endorse a call for justice on a particular issue, etc. And so the motion and framing it as such, then it triggers an event within the meeting where once that motion is put forward, someone else in the meeting needs to second it, and they just raise their hand and say second. And they, by doing so, they're saying, I too would like to see that happen. Or at the very least, that they would like to see that motion be put forward for a vote. And it shows that there's support for this idea or for this decision besides just the person who is putting it forward. Once there's a second, you then ask the group, are there any objections to this motion? And if anyone raises their hand, you can ask them to state their objection. And then from there, you can move into discussion on that particular motion about what is the objection to it. I think I might sneeze at a moment, so if that happens, don't freak out. I'm trying to bear it down. All right, so you have discussion. You can set a time limit for discussion on this objection, which is a great thing to do to keep your meeting from getting too dragged down, especially if it's a motion that is not the most critical, impactful decision that you have to make during that meeting. And then after there being discussion, you can ask if the person with the objection, if their concerns have been satisfied and if they'd like to stand aside or withdraw their objection. People can offer amendments to the motion. We can talk about that process in a future live stream. And if there is not a resolution that people can achieve consensus on, then you move to a vote after the stack for discussion it has been moved through. And there's also item of calling the question, which is another mechanism we can talk about in the future. And so then you actually have a vote. And now, a common mistake that people will make when they're facilitating meetings is someone will put forward a motion, and then the facilitator will immediately call for all those in favor. And that's not what we do. We first ask if there's any objections or if there are any questions about the motion. And by questions, this is like questions that will help someone's understanding of what the motion is for or the purpose of the motion. This is not a chance to pontificate or to ask philosophical questions. These are questions related to your understanding of the motion as a member of the meeting, right? So, following that, you then ask for, if there are objections, then you move into discussion. And after the person with the objection has a chance to state the objection, and then you eventually move into a vote or someone withdraws the objection. And so if the motion moves forward and there's a second and there are no objections, then you just say, as the facilitator, the motion passes by consensus. And that's great. You've made your decision, you move on, right? Keep the meeting moving. Very important to do. And so that's just a brief overview on kind of the pattern for how motions work within a meeting context. I would like to spend a stream in the future just dedicated to that part, but if you can at least get that beginning part down of, a motion is put forward, there's a second, you ask if there's any objections, person objection states the objection, move in the discussion, and then after you have moved through the discussion using the stack, as we explained earlier, then you seek a vote, or ideally at some point the objection has been resolved. So that is a structure, right, for how to handle disagreement and how to seek decisions. And frequently what you might come across is people just sort of articulating what they want to happen, but they don't want to actually put forward a motion because they are not confident of what they really want to happen. Like maybe they know what they don't want to happen, but they don't know what they want. And so if they're not willing to put forward a motion, and it's almost like placing a bet, sort of, or it's like showing your hand in poker or something. It's like you can articulate desires, but if you're not willing to actually put it forward as a motion and have the body decide on it, you're not entitled to that to happen. That's just not how it works. And so I don't know, maybe this is not something that happens a lot in meetings, but I've seen it happen in a number that I've attended. And so you always want to, again, be seeking decision, and the people within a democratic body, right? The people who are able to articulate what they want in such a way that they are able to get other people to agree with it, they're the ones who get what they want. That's how it works in democracy. Democracy does not mean that just everybody gets what they want all the time. It's about getting other people to agree with you and then moving forward with that. And so thinking about how can I articulate what I want in such a way that other people can agree to it and it is actionable and feasible by the organization is a really important way for you to participate in the party. So that was a little sidetrack away from facilitation there, but it just kind of gets to the flip side of the meeting, which is like how to be an effective participant in a meeting, which is, I think an overlooked aspect of meeting culture. So that is today's episode of How Greens Get Things Done. We've been talking about some basics of meeting facilitation. My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Green Party of New York staff organizer. I talk to you all here live 4 p.m. Eastern Time every Sunday afternoon, at least most Sunday afternoons. And if you enjoyed this stream, if you found it useful, please share this Facebook Live link to your comrades and friends and fellow Green Party members. We have an archive building on YouTube. You can see a playlist of videos at gpny.org/video, and I'm continuing to add videos from this stream to that YouTube playlist on gpny.org/video. And I really hope that if you found anything helpful, that you please send me an email at michael@gpny.org. Let me know what you found helpful, what topics you would like to see in the future. If you have any questions about anything that we have talked about on this live stream, you can post that here in the comment section for this video, or again, email me at michael@gpny.org. And I hope that you are all having a wonderful October leading up to election day. We're well into election season. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And I want to thank you for watching How Greens Get Things Done. Have a great Sunday.